English translation of your story, Sogu Uftobus, The Last Bus. The Last Bus. New York City, USA. Winter's harsh nights, a dull gray sky, and stormy winds. Margaret James, a 70-year-old woman, lives in a retirement home in New York. Most people call this place the final stop. Here, new beginnings are rare. But for Margaret, each day began with new hope and fresh intention. Her husband, Robert James, was 75 years old. He was spending his final days in an oncology hospital. They had been married for nearly 50 years, enduring life's ups and downs together. Robert had been a teacher all his life, educating and inspiring thousands of students. Margaret had worked in a library. Their love had only grown stronger with time. Instead of pulling them apart, the years had brought them closer. One day, the doctor told Margaret, "Robert's condition is critical. Unless a miracle happens, these may be his final days." From that day on, Margaret waited for the last evening bus every day to visit the hospital. Sometimes, the icy wind would sting her face and the snow would blur her vision. Sometimes the bus was late and drivers would ask in disbelief, "Ma'am, why are you going out in this weather? You should wait till tomorrow." But Margaret always gave the same reply. "I can't be late. Robert knows I'm coming. He's waiting for me." No one could truly understand their bond. Robert hardly spoke anymore, frail and weak. But whenever Margaret arrived, his eyes would light up, he'd gently reach out his hand and quietly smile. Those moments held all the meaning in their world. One evening, the storm intensified. Roads were being shut down. Bus routes were on the verge of being canceled. Snow fell heavily, and streetlights barely shone through the haze. Staff at the retirement home said, "Margaret, please don't go today. The weather is too dangerous." But she bundled up, gripped her old cane, and made her way out. "I must go. He's waiting. I'm his only strength," she thought to herself. Against all odds, the last bus arrived. The driver, surprised, said, "I stopped just for you, ma'am." On the way, a young man sat beside her. Margaret shared the story of her husband. Tears welled up in The Last Bus. Continuation. Years passed. It was the first days of spring. New York. Margaret's life changed after Robert was gone. Most people can't go on after such a loss, but Margaret decided otherwise. She chose to fill the emptiness in her soul with hope. She gathered Robert's books, memories, and old letters, and together with a young man named David, wrote a book called The Last Bus. The book unexpectedly made a huge impact in America. Hundreds of people wrote to her, saying, "Your story changed my life." One day, she received an invitation from university to share her life story with students. The young audience listened intently. Some couldn't hold back their tears. Others watched with quiet envy. Standing at the podium, Margaret said softly, "True love means sacrifice, forgiveness, and time. Robert loved me with his whole heart, and now I want to touch lives in his name." From that day on, she founded the Love and Hope Foundation. The organization was dedicated to supporting the elderly and offering psychological help to those living in loneliness. She started the foundation with a simple postcard bearing Robert's photograph and a message. If you're receiving this card, it means someone out there is thinking of you. A new chapter. One early morning, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. When she answered, a quiet voice whispered, "Ma'am, I'm a young man who once sat with you on the bus. Your story inspired me to change my life. I now work in an oncology center. I learned how to be there for people in their final days from you." Margaret fell silent. Tears streamed down her face. It wasn't just a call. It was Robert returning to her in the form of kindness. 2 years later, a film adaptation of The Last Bus was made. Margaret didn't play the lead role, but her spirit, her heart, and her story could be felt in every scene. The final page. One warm spring evening, she sat by her window, writing a letter to a young boy. "Dear child, if you're reading this letter, it means you still have the strength to love and to save someone. Life is not long, but love is eternal. One day, one bus can change a life. If you dare to step out, everything can change." She finished the letter and gently closed her eyes. just as she once told Robert in their final conversation. Now I too can rest in peace. The next morning, the city's last bus departed as usual, but one seat remained empty. The people of the city began to call it Margaret's seat, the flame of hope. For years later, New York City, late spring. David is now 28. He comes from an immigrant family and had a childhood filled with hardship. Once, while riding an evening bus home during winter, he met an elderly woman named Margaret, a meeting that would change the course of his life. At that time, David had stopped believing in everything: love, good people, and the future. But Margaret's gentle voice that night, the strength in her expression, and her unwavering devotion to her husband Robert, it all stirred something deep within him, a quiet voice that awakened his soul. After Margaret passed away, David made it his mission to continue the work of the Last Bus Foundation. Every day, he searched for the elderly living on the streets, for lonely parents with no one to care for them. Sometimes he would simply sit beside them in silence, sip tea, and listen to their stories. One day, while visiting an old hospital in Brooklyn, he met a 90-year-old woman sitting alone in a corner. She never spoke to anyone, avoided eye contact, and never responded. But David gently began. Did you know, once I met a woman on a late-night bus. Her name was Margaret. Even in a storm, she left the hospital because of her love for her husband. The old woman slowly raised her head. Tears welled in her eyes. She spoke softly. I've been waiting too, but I didn't think anyone would ever come. That day, David started writing letters to her. He spoke about love, hope, and the beautiful strength of waiting. Within 2 weeks, the woman learned to smile. Soon after, she began talking to other patients as well. A new initiative. In 2028, David expanded the Last Bus into a large-scale project. In every major city, small buses began to operate under that name. These buses provided free transportation for the elderly, hospital patients, and those living alone, taking them wherever they wanted to go, whenever they needed. Each seat in the bus had a small plaque. This seat is for someone who once waited for love and changed their destiny. Margaret's photo, Robert's books, and the story that connected them all. They began inspiring young people across the country. The final letter. One evening, while riding on a late-night bus, David met a little girl. She was on her way to the hospital with her mother. With shy curiosity, she asked, "Mister, have you ever talked about a kind old woman? Was her name Margaret?" David looked surprised, then smiled warmly. "That woman saved my life," he said. The girl reached into her coat and handed him an old, crumpled letter. "My mom said to give this to the foundation that woman created." Inside the letter it read, "If you're reading this letter, it means another heart has awakened. Margaret is gone, but her love lives on through your work. No matter which path you take, never miss the last bus." At the bottom of the letter, a quote once said by Robert was written. The empty seat. New York. 6 years later. Dusk. It had been 6 years since Margaret passed away, but the foundation established in her name was still actively operating. Every week, the Last Bus continued its route to hospitals on the outskirts of the city, senior homes, and dormitories where lonely people lived. One day, a 19-year-old girl named Sophia boarded that bus. She had left home after an argument with her stepmother, feeling disillusioned with life. All she carried was an old backpack and a school book. As always, there was one empty seat on the bus. The driver looked at her and smiled. "That seat is never taken. It's Margaret's seat." The girl was startled. Who was she? The driver, without laughing, spoke calmly. A woman. Many years ago, she sat on this very bus and changed a young man's heart. Since then, this bus has become more than just a vehicle. It's a silent witness, a cry from the heart. A sign. That night, Sophia went to the foundation's main center. There was a note pinned on the door. If you feel like there's no place for you in life, this place is open to you. That night, Sophia stayed at the foundation's temporary shelter. She didn't talk much at first, but as she browsed the bookshelf, one title caught her eye. The Last Bus, a true story of Margaret and Robert. The more she read, the more warmth entered her heart. She had never seen this woman, But Margaret's life began to lift Sophia from the depths of her own sorrow. A new chapter. 2 months later, Sophia became a volunteer at the foundation. She began spending time with elderly women, learning to write letters to seniors. At the end of every letter, she always added the same line: "I'm sorry I came late, but now you're not alone." One day, Sophia found Margaret's final letter in the Foundation's archive. It was written to Robert, but had never reached him. "Robert, if someone is reading this letter, it means your love is still alive. The hope you gave now lives in other hearts. I remember you every day. You were just one man, but you left peace for a nation." Sophia couldn't hold back her tears. In that moment, she made a decision. The last bus must expand across the country. The journey begins. In the spring of 2029, Sophia and her team launched the Journey of Love. They repaired an old bus and set off to reach every corner of the country. In every city, they tried to be a friend to the lonely and hope to those forgotten. And in every letter they gave, Margaret's words lived on.